Okay, we are coming to you live from the BEP studio for another thought provoking episode of a Black Executive Perspective podcast, a safe space where we discuss all matters regarding race, culture, and those uncomfortable topics people tend to avoid. I'm your host, Tony Tidbit.
And I'm your co-host, Chris P. Reed. And we're here to tackle the real, the raw, and often uncomfortable truths that shape our world. No fluff, no filters, just bold conversations on issues that matter live. For the power to the politics, culture, to corporate America, we break it down all of the barriers, all of the silos without holding back. So let's get into it.
Buddy, let's definitely get into it, my brother. So, number one, good to see you, my man. I know you're down in Dallas. Is it? I know Texas got hit by some really bad storms, bro. So let's start there, man. What's going on?
So global warming. I'm gonna try to be responsible. I can't say specifically because I'm not a meteorologist. I did not go to school for this. So there's the disclaimer for Black Executive Perspective. But we got a lot of situations where there's been weather anomalies throughout the country. Long winters, hot summers, things of that nature. But this flash flooding thing has been a situation in Texas since I moved here. 15 odd years ago, and the issue is they say that the soil isn't porous. The soil doesn't absorb the water. And so when it rains like that in the torrential downpour, it runs off. There's a runoff effect. And so that clay soil, they got it in Georgia too, but that clay soil, we from the Midwest, so it soaks in and takes up for the crops. You know what I'm saying? It helps Mother Earth. But down here it runs. And unfortunately, because of a lot of different factors, timing being one of them, these rivers and these areas where you have these river beds or these large bodies of water that seep out, they can overflow very quickly. And you can go to YouTube or you can go to any channel and just type in Texas flooding, and you'll see real time. And it's not time lapsed. Like a lot of this stuff is within, I think my wife said 26 feet in 25 minutes or something. It's just, it comes up on you quicker than you would think. And all it made me think of, Tony, to be honest with you, was in instances where the Weather Bureau or some responsible body gives you a warning and tells you to get out of Dodge, it behooves you to do so. I think in this situation, it was so fast and it probably came along like a tornado or any natural disaster. So I'm not saying that people were irresponsible here. What I am saying is we got to be prayerful, we got to be vigilant. But these things happen. And of course, when children are involved in the loss of life on a mass scale, that adds, fervor to it. I haven't heard anything. I don't know if you have up in Connecticut. Have you heard anything about FEMA or any of the governmental? Because our government is in the bickering cycle right now. So I don't know what they're doing as it relates to state of emergency.
Well, buddy, I haven't heard FEMA. I mean, I know Governor Abbott
Mm-hmm.
created a state of emergency for those counties and stuff of that nature. I would imagine that the federal government is going to get involved. But back to your point, buddy, these things, this flooding, it goes on, it happens real fast. And, just last week, a few days ago, we had a thunderstorm come through. And I mean, bro, it wasn't even, wind start blowing.
Mm-hmm.
Next thing you know, it started raining real hard.
Mm-hmm.
Next thing you know, I see a river of water. My neighbors, I text them and say, man, did you get your barrels? He's like, I'm going to come down and get them now. I'm like, it's too late. They're floating down the street. I mean, in minutes, bro, in minutes. It was a river going down our street. Okay. So I can imagine that, and that's sad. I mean, it's really sad when you have these type of national disasters that happen that just wipe out. We had that, I think it was last year, and was it Monroe, Connecticut? It was one of these towns in Connecticut. Same type of situation, man. It was, and the weather was like, hey, I didn't even think it was supposed to rain. And it rained, and in that area, they got hammered and bridges fell. It's really bad, though, man. So I know there's still they're still trying to rescue people there.
Yep. Yep.
So our prayers, a Black Executive Perspective podcast, prayers are for everybody there. We hope, number one, that you and your family became, you wasn't, was unscathed in terms of the disaster. And if you're still looking for loved ones, our prayers, or you have family, in hospitals, what the case may be, our prayers are with you, and we wish nothing but the best.
Let me say this, and just for us, as fathers, as leaders, as husbands, what we do here becomes so much more magnified and important on this platform because for Memorial Day we went to Austin to hang out with some of our neighbors. It was a couple hours away, and we were there. 2 days later, they had an epic hailstorm, and I mean softball size hail. You can go look at that too on the internet. And it was $1 billion worth of damage in the city, Austin proper. The reason why this becomes important as it relates to these natural disasters is because they are not geopolitical. Who cares how close it is to the border? Who cares what the demographics of the makeup of the county or the region of the country is when so many lives are being lost to something we can't control? It's a sobering effect of how human we all are beyond the bull, beyond the party lines and all this other stuff. And we have to take care of each other as human beings, regardless of citizenship status and all this other stuff. You know what I'm saying? When they have these things, we had heard this when we did something on the Uvalde shooting with the kids. You get all this stuff where people get sidetracked by the divisiveness of the administrations and forget that, look, we are human beings trying to live good, take care of our children, and do the right thing for the most part. We're all striving for opportunity and chances to be better and do better. That's the whole reason why people came here on the Mayflower.
Right.
So
Right.
so in the idea of we're in this cycle of things that are going on politically, and these things of good, bad, or indifferent, these things bring you back to that's a distraction. That's an agenda. This humanity, this nature is showing us with the wildfires, with everything. Dog, it didn't care how much money you had or if you was in Calabasas or someplace. It did not care.
Or
And
if you're
we have,
Republican, a Democrat, or
none of that,
independent,
bro.
none of it doesn't matter, right?
None of
Totally
it
agree,
matters.
buddy.
None of it
Totally
matters.
agree.
So if there's a lesson to be had, if you try to eke out any type of lesson or discernment from these things, as sad as they are, I hope that resonates with our audience more than anything else. Is that reach out to the Red Cross, reach out to people that you forget about the religious affiliations and all this other stuff. Help where you can because you've been in a position or placed in a position or put yourself in a position, work for a position to where you could give back a little bit. This is the time to invest in humanity, not in party lines.
Absolutely, buddy. You hit it right on the head. We're all citizens of the United States of America. We all want the same thing. And so we may, it reminds me, it doesn't remind me because it's not on that same level because, 9/11 was on a whole level by itself, right? However, I do remember being in the city when it happened, which was devastating, right? I'll never forget that, being there on 42nd and Madison. But here's the thing. The next day, we didn't come to work. And then we came to work a day later. I think it was a Thursday or something like that because it happened on Tuesday. We came to work on that Thursday. And then Friday had a day of mourning. So everybody went to their closest church, synagogue, what do you call it? Mosque. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Everybody, right? And here was the thing. I remember we came out of our building. We were on 11th floor, 42nd and Madison. And we were walking to this Catholic church around. I didn't even know where the Catholic church was, where the church was, but it was a church a couple blocks away. And everybody came out of the buildings throughout Manhattan. And everybody was going to a mosque or all at noon. So you saw thousands of people come out. And I'll tell you this though, man, experiencing that was the first time I ever saw the country come together, where people came together, where people, it didn't matter what your political affiliation or what your color was or religion, all those things that we were bickering about and talking about, didn't matter. It was, we were Americans and we were all coming together and we all, wanted safety and we were sorry for what happened for 3,000 people that, died in the, on the planes as well as in the World Trade Center. And that was a very proud moment. I'll be totally honest with you, right? Because I was like, wow. Now, a couple weeks later, it went right back, okay, to the bickering and pointing fingers and all that type of stuff. But I was at least able to see in my lifetime that the people of the United States all came together around a common thing. And it was so here's the thing. I know we can because I've seen it. I've seen it. I know we can, right? I just wish we would do it more often. And, it's like your family, you grow up and you grow up with them, you hang out with them, right? Your cousins and everybody, right? Then everybody goes their ways. And then when do you get back with them?
Funeral.
When somebody died. Okay? When somebody died. Then everybody comes together and we hang out. And then we sit around and say, man, why don't we get together more often? And everybody promised we ain't going to let this go. We're going to keep. And then same thing happens, right? You don't see them no more. And then they come. So, but that's life, right? It happens. Here's the thing, though. When we got together, because of somebody passed away or whatever, the only thing that would bother me is when people started fighting and arguing about a bunch of bullshit. You see what I'm saying? That those family feuds didn't leave that where you left, where you came from, right? And so that's how it should be here, okay? Is that, look, take all that divisiveness, you mad at Aunt Joe or Uncle James or whatever, don't bring that to this funeral, okay? Let's be together as a family. And let's respect the people who passed away. And the same thing in this situation. Let's come together as a family in the United States and let's support, it could be GoFundMe or going, taking somebody some food or whatever. Support the people down in Texas who's dealing with this horrific situation.
And so to put a pin in what you were saying, the criticality of the moment requires and demands a level of decorum and a level of respect. And we see too often that, and I miss the times where we could get over ourselves just for a fleeting moment and have some peace and some camaraderie and some joy for a week or a day or whatever the case may be. Because at this point in time, unfortunately, and we'll talk about this, while we're on this right now on this live, it's a situation where we just can't get right, man. Like it's a lot of instances where you think that the moment, the opportunity, where we are as a nation should be important enough, like a funeral, to have some respect, to have some, couth about yourself. But it's just the nature of where we are now when everybody takes ample opportunity to not do the best thing. And it's tough.
Here's the thing, though, man. I want you to hold that thought.
Okay.
Because you make an excellent point. And, I was thinking I've always thought about that. Why doesn't people see it the way this? Why doesn't people see it like this? Or why doesn't people do the right thing? Why do people don't, they still fight and bicker and stuff to that nature, right? And I was watching, so look, I'm pretty sure, hopefully everybody knows, Ken Burns is going to be releasing a documentary called The American Revolution. It's coming out in November. I think it's a 12-hour series, 6 parts, 12 hours. And, it's been a big thing. I've read some stuff on it. And then he's been making the rounds on all the, television shows. I saw him on Face the Nation. He's been on Meet the Press, all over, right? Promoting the book, promoting the story. And if anybody know about Ken Burns, he's a storyteller, right? And he dives deep into history. You've never seen some of Ken Burns' stuff?
No, man, no.
Buddy, you kidding me? You never watched Vietnam. He did the thing on Vietnam. You never saw about baseball. He did a thing on baseball, right?
No, you're introducing me. You're introducing me.
Buddy, Ken Burns, you kidding me? And most of his stuff is on PBS, okay? And he does it because that's the way he reach, because he needs time to put, and that's what he talks about. He said, look, it took me 10 years to do some of this stuff, right? Because I need time because I'm diving into the history, right? But back to my point. I want to play a couple of clips here because, number one, when he spoke, I think he spoke with John Dickerson of CBS Evening News, but it was on Face the Nation. This came on Sunday. And obviously, as he goes into, he's going to have this documentary about the Civil War, what is he talking about? He's talking about what happened from a historic standpoint, right? And so, and obviously where we are today, history is being attacked. Okay. And so I want to play this clip of him, and then I want to get your thoughts about what he's saying. And the first clip is really about, history and what's going on and why is he doing what he's doing.
As someone who worked so hard on telling the story of slavery and enslaved people in various different ways, what did you learn about slavery in America from working on this?
It's so complicated and so interesting. I think the thing that was most striking that's come to me is that it was really clear that our founders, even those founders who owned other human beings, knew that the institution of slavery was indefensible. It's only later in the 19th century that you'll try to make excuses for why it's okay. And that they're really wrestling with ways. But there are human beings that are owned by other human beings. It's very, very complicated, and you can never say a categorical them about anybody, and that's all we do. Look, I have made films about the US for all of my professional life, but I've also made films simultaneously about us. All of the intimacy of that, all the majesty and complexity and contradiction and controversy of the US. And the thing I've learned, if I've learned anything, is that there's only us. There's no them. And we're constantly being told there's a them. There's no them.
If there is only us and no them, it is also a strain in American history. Look at them, go get them.
That's right. It's the simplest thing. It's the authoritarian's playbook.
There's a lot of talk about them these days. Are you hoping to pierce that with this telling of America's beginning?
I don't have a conscious desire to do this. That implies a kind of agenda, a kind of a political agenda. We consciously understand as we're working on a film how much is rhyming in the present, and it changes a little bit and changes that, but we don't ever try to put neon signs going, look how much this is so much like today. We just want to let that resonate, and you go, oh my goodness, George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, they may have wigs and they may have breeches. They're very much like us.
So, buddy, by watching that, what's your thoughts? I want to hear what's just, because this is the first time you say, let me hear your thoughts.
So my thoughts about the first of all, what stood out the most and what was most poignant is the us and them dynamic.
Yes.
The us and them dynamic.
Yes.
And
Which we were just kind of talking about a little bit. Right?
Absolutely. The fact is, supremacy can't be socialistic. It can't be a situation where you want a sense of entitlement and supremacy and feel equal and appropriately juxtaposed to your neighbor. In order for you to have a level of domination or dominion over folks, you have to put them down, you have to cascade them, you have to demonize them. So at this point in time, it was convenient for economic purposes to, before the United States, I'm not going to go too far back, but the idea of savagery and taming these anybody that doesn't think like me, regardless of what their education is or whatever, we do it now. I mean, Tony, just to be honest, when he talked about the rhythm of the past and the future and how these things connect, we do this now with foreign individuals who come over with doctorate degrees, and we got them working at 7-Eleven until they prove themselves. Like, if I didn't say it, it didn't happen, or it didn't. And that lens of, if it's not the way I see it, if it's not the way I feel, and what's the biggest problem is, then it's not appropriate. It's not good enough. It's not American. Let's just keep it honest. It's not American. The problem is, we're in a time now, and this goes back 10 years, where the hypocrisy has allowed for what you said we were to change when you feel like you want to change it. And that causes more frustration and upheaval. And like you would say famously, agents of chaos reign because of that. And so, I don't ever cast aspersions on all white folks because of this, or, nothing is monolithic in that regard. But the idea of the more you start realizing the connection and how alike we are when we look at You talked about crimes in a previous conversation we had, where there are crimes of proximity. White folks kill white folks. Black folks, they're black on black, white on white, Mexican on Mexican. Like, it's because you live by those people and you're around those
Correct.
people. They are crimes of
Correct.
proximity.
Correct.
That's how this works. We're more alike the people that we're around, whether it be socioeconomic or otherwise. We're more alike the people at our jobs than we want to believe. And we construct race as a convenient way to differentiate us. We construct different things. And that's what I saw he was speaking of. These are all constructs.
But his point is, there is no them. It's us, right? And we're all us.
Yeah.
They create a them.
Yes.
So them is created, right? And so that's the thing, though. But people forget that. They think them started at the same time as us.
Right.
Or they think them came after us, right? At the end of the day, it's only us. Okay? So what does that mean? That means that everybody that was born here, everybody that came over here, that was part of doing something for this country is us. Mm-hmm. See that? It's us. Mm-hmm. It's us. Now, to your point, absolutely. People, when you want to cause division and you want to, you're power hungry and you all these other things, then you create thems.
Yep.
Right? And it's easy to create thems if you can make people, if you can tie it to people's fears. Mm-hmm. Okay? But his point was very valid. Look, like you said, I've done a million stories on everything. I can tell you flat out, there is no them. It's an us, right? And this is the thing. This is why it's important, very important, for history to be told in a way that talks about us, all of us, okay? That's the key. Here, I'm going to play this next little clip and let me hear what your thoughts are.
Okay.
President Trump has issued an executive action in which he says basically history's gotten out of balance as the American government either funds it through museums or national parks. And he said instead that this federal role in history should instead focus on the greatness of the achievements and the progress of the American people. So President Trump thinks there's an imbalance in the way we talk about history. How do you see that?
I don't see the imbalance. I think we need to celebrate the greatness of the American people. The greatness of the American people comes from telling these complicated stories. And that's a good story is a good story is a good story. That's what you're looking for. You don't want to just say it. Otherwise, it's just sort of slogans that are put up on the wall. We want to feel that we know who Thomas Jefferson is. We need to understand the internal struggles that Abraham Lincoln had. We have to understand what was going through Rosa Parks' mind when she refused to give up her seat on the bus. This in no way takes away from the glory. It just makes the story fuller and richer and permits purchase for everyone. You want a history to be complicated because it gives everybody a chance to own or have access to it. There is my door where I'm going through. There's a wonderful scholar, Maggie Blackhawk, in our film, who says, after our scene on the Declaration of Independence, that it's deeply significant to people at the margins, that these words that do not include them, they do not include women, they do not include the poor, they do not include any enslaved or free African Americans, they do not include Native Americans, but the words themselves are so inspirational that they begin to suggest a much larger and more what we would say kind of American polity, that a bunch of us all together of different varieties doing lots of different things and pursuing happiness, this idea of virtue and lifelong learning.
Thoughts, buddy?
Tony, humanity itself, not just in the United States, but worldwide, is complicated. It evolves, it changes, it grows, and it descends. The reality of it is, and I'm just going to say this because they said it in a clip, Trump emphasizes or puts a priority in highlights over humanity.
Correct.
If you go by your highlights, you're the greatest man. Literally, if I only said your highlights, Tony Tidbit's highlights, that's for funerals, okay? That's what funerals are for. That's
Correct.
what funerals
Correct.
are for.
Correct.
And when we
Correct.
try to whitewash or assuage some of these stories, some of the importance, some of the narratives, and only focus on the highlights that align with your past and your agenda, So forget about my highlights and your highlights, because there's no room for everybody's highlights. We have to take out the other highlights and just focus on mine. But the problem is this: I would still have a problem with that, Tony. But where the anger and where the disappointment comes is you don't want to just dismiss my highlights. You want to turn my accomplishments into negatives and
Right.
cast everybody as criminals and
Right.
everybody as cast
Right.
outs and everybody is
Right.
You can't just take your highlights and be good. But
But
instead
here's
of
the-
you doing that, go ahead.
No. I'm agreeing with you. Let me just take it to the next level.
Yeah.
So here's the thing, and this is where people don't. And so how do you get greatness? Okay. Well, let me say it this way.
Okay.
You know, I learned this a long time ago. Somebody asked me, Tony, do you know how a diamond is made? And I'm like, no. They said, well, a diamond is a piece of coal that's put under a tremendous amount of pressure that becomes a beautiful stone. Okay? So think about that for a second. For this beautiful stone, this greatness of the stone, before it becomes beautiful, the reason it became beautiful, because of all the trials and tribulations it had to go through to become a beautiful stone, right? And so greatness doesn't just happen. Okay, greatness is about this full story of the missteps and the trials and tribulations and the making the wrong decisions and correcting those decisions and taking 2 steps back and 2 forward. Right? That's how that's where you get greatness. You share it all, right? Not just say, hey, they built this building, they're great, or here's a statue of George Washington in the river. He was great, right? Let me give you another example of what happens when you just try to promote highlights. All right. And then you want people to only understand the highlights. Let me tell you what happens when you do that. Okay. You ever remember this dude last name called Murdoch?
Only the Fox guy I know, Murdoch, Rupert Murdoch.
Not the Fox guy, but the Murdochs who were big down, I don't know if in Tennessee, their families was lawyers, and he just went to jail because he killed his wife and his son.
I heard about that.
Right? And he lied, blah, 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 blah. Well, here's the thing. The Murdochs go back, I don't know, 10, 15 generations. Okay. And the Murdochs were supposed to be known as this high society. They were the mayors. They own lawyer offices. They did all these things, right? And so everybody, the highlights was the Murdochs were this great people, this great family. See my point here? All right. And they're great, great, great. But that's the highlights. But internally, once they peel back the onion, the father was a gangster. The family was robbing people, this, that, this, and that. Right. So at the end of the day, there was no foundation for greatness. It was all bullshit. It was fake. It was, we just want to show the highlights.
Right.
Okay. And then so think about that for a second. Let's say you're part of that family and they hide all these things that the patriarch or the great-great-grandfather, all the dirty things they did, and just promoted the highlights. Then one day, and you're thinking, well, we did no wrong. Our family is this. Our family is that. And then one day, it comes crumbling down because then they show you that your father was a thief. He was a liar. He was a murderer. Your family did this. How would you feel then about your family?
Betrayed.
Exactly. Because now what you thought you was about or what you thought you came from isn't true. It's fake. It was a narrative that was made up so people would buy into it. But so at the end of the day, you got to tell all of the story, right? That's where greatness comes from. It's not highlights. And at the end of the day, that's like saying, you showing pictures of America, of Central Park, and what's the monuments in South Dakota? Huh?
it's all,
Mount
yeah,
Rushmore.
Mount Rushmore, yeah.
You're showing Mount Rushmore. You're showing all these great things, right? And then you got these pictures of all this beautiful and strong and just this is what America is, right? And then at the end of the day, well, wait a minute. If somebody came from Mars and said, well, was it always that way, right? And so, but at the end of the day, when you go back, this shit was a volcano.
Yeah.
It was on rocks. They had dinosaurs walking through. Okay? You see my point here?
Yeah.
So you got to tell all of the history. How did it get to that? How did it come to that? Versus just showing the highlights or omitting the Native Americans or anybody else out of it like they didn't matter, which is part of the greatness because they help make it great. You understand my point?
Absolutely. And let me just, on your diamond analogy, we create history every day. We have an opportunity to better ourselves and create history every day. One of the things that you understand about a diamond is, and you talked about the pressure over time, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of pressure to go from coal to a diamond. But one of the things that we would all on this at the sound of my voice understand is it's not just one diamond. It's not just one diamond, one size, one type. That's the beautiful one. There's so many variations and diversity in diamonds, whether it be pear-shaped or heart-shaped or whatever. And it takes a level of friction to polish that diamond. Even though it's created into a stone, you have to apply friction over time and purposeful friction to make sure that that's polished and created in a certain way. But it's not just what the problem is. We're trying to make it seem as if only one type of diamond is the right diamond. Only
Correct.
one type of diamond needs to be
The hope
here.
diamond.
Only
The hope
one,
diamond.
Man, and
Right?
if no other diamond measures up to that diamond.
If you ain't this diamond, you don't
Man,
belong
you
here.
ain't-
You ain't part of
man,
greatness,
You
right?
ain't part of greatness.
And
Diamonds
that's
are
what my
diamonds.
and that's what my man was saying. Look,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, you got to tell the whole story.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's not under assault. Okay. Because you want to show Murdoch stabbing somebody. All right. That's the truth. That's what happened.
It's not a witch hunt. Yep.
Okay. Exactly. But you got to tell the truth and you can't be trying to omit people out of it because you don't want to. Look, why do you think they're trying to omit? Why do you think they're trying to write people of color out of history? Why do you think that?
Because they don't want to share in the royalties.
So when you say they want to share in the royalties, like, what do you mean?
There's a level of pride that exists in feeling like you were a part of something or you helped to build or develop something great. You see this in business. I don't know if you've had business partners or whatever, but human nature is to try to elbow those out to where it's all about when the story's told, ultimately, the victor writes history. If you go and look at different histories, and I've studied histories throughout the world, whoever won wrote the books. If they was losing, they burned the books. Okay, this is why the Library of Alexandria was burned.
Great, yeah.
They burned that shit. So in the idea of trying to write marginalized people out of the history because you realize the impact that they had, and at some point in time, a reckoning or some type of justification of, wait a second, you didn't do this by yourself. You didn't have all these inventions. Think about patents. We can talk about so many different things. This can splinter off, and I don't want to splinter it off. But the idea of the one thing that I would push back on is the us and them. I was mentoring a young man recently, a very young man, 9 years old. And I realized the best way to get across to him in the conversation was good guys and bad guys. When you talk about us and them, I think us are the good guys.
Wait, so here's the thing, but let me jump in on this. That's my point here. So let's go back to, look, what you were saying about the victor gets to write the stuff, right? So I get that. If you take over and conquer a land, then I get it, right? But the land's we already live in the land and they're trying to rewrite. that's my point. But the conquest is more about what you just got finished saying, all right? Is that, let's go back to the Murdoch thing. Okay, let's just keep it just down to earth. What does Murdoch want to show? That they were
the upper crest. That they were the good guys.
They were a great family, right? Yep. They don't want people to know that they were dirty. that they were, they were murderers. They don't want that. That's what this is about, bro. It's about, if we gotta have the real history, then we can't lie to everybody else that we didn't have dirt on our hands, that we didn't, it just goes back to what we were talking about on the show, right? When you have a company and the company comes up with a value statement. We believe in this, we believe in that, we do this. To work here, you got to believe this, you got to do that. We don't accept people. We want people for integrity. We want people who got who's a teammate. We want people that communicate. We want people that won't steal, all those things, right? And that's what they put on the walls. But at the end of the day, they don't live up to that.
Correct.
They don't walk that every day, right? So at the end of the day, they want you to think that this is who we are. But in reality, they're not. So if I can write out and eliminate groups that I know I treated bad, or we didn't really do the right thing with them, right? But they're still here. But if I just write them out, right? People will say, well, they must have the same situation that everybody else in, because there's no context to it. You have to have context, okay? And so if I write out the context, nobody will ever question what we did bad. Nobody will ever question, did we treat everybody the same? Nobody will ever question, did we steal land from people? Nobody will ever question. You see my point here? So if we can, now to what you were saying, if I take over land, then I'm writing them out. I get that. But we're already on the land, right? You think about it, when we did Wilmington's Lie, what were they trying to hide? They were trying to hide the dastardly deeds that they did, it was a coup d'etat. We murdered these people to take power, right? That's what that was. All right. So it was just like, we don't want nobody to know what we did.
But knowledge is power, and we're in the age of intellectual property, Tony. What they're trying to take and conquer is the intellectual property. If you write us out the books and you take us out of the data stream, then all of a sudden the data stream is only showing the highlights that you would like to be represented. And 10 years from now, 20 years from now, if nobody's here to refute it, it becomes the new truth. If you tell a lie long enough, it becomes the truth.
We're saying the same thing, right? We're exactly saying the same thing, right? Is that, and that's the point, right? If we can take them out, okay, nobody will question it. We don't see. Look, think about it for a second. Why do people who break in somebody's house, or what's another example? Somebody robs a bank, okay, and they thought nobody was going to be there. But then they get there, and here's the janitor, or somebody came in to work late. All right. So what do? We got to kill the witnesses. All right. We got to kill them, because if they're around, they'll talk. All right. Even if it's 5 years from now, we got to. That's what this is my point here, right? So because the witness will tell the dirty deed, okay? So we got to get rid of them, because then when we get rid of all the witnesses, there's nobody can say nothing. So it's the same thing from me. That's what I'm saying. We're saying the same thing. They're trying to, you're just saying it a little differently than I'm saying it, but it's the same thing. They want to wipe it away so nobody can hold them accountable to what the real history is, right? Or even question it.
Absolutely. That level of accountability, I have lost faith in that. And the reason why is this. I've had enough conversations on this platform and others where, and we talked about this as the backfire effect, where when confronted with the truth, people don't reveal that, oh my gosh, you've enlightened me, I've had an epiphany. They more often than not retreat to a defensive position and dig in on what they believed in, regardless of what the reality is presenting itself to. We did a show with a woman who did a documentary called Ain't No Back to a Merry-Go-Round. And she unveiled how marches propagated by Jewish and white individuals for integration in that part of the country, in the DC, I think MDV area, the MDV area around Howard University, I think it was. And that was information that I hadn't been privy to. This was the first organized, blah, 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 blah. They don't want you to feel like we have had allies, abolitionists. you know, from Christmas addicts to Frederick Douglass. Like there are people that were involved in the abolition of slavery. They want to dumb down those, because if you had to fight for something, it means that you knew it was wrong. When he talked about George Washington, he talked, but these weren't just bad guys because this is the way things were, but they knew in their heart of hearts, in their moral compass, they realized this ain't
Correct.
This
Correct.
ain't what it should
Correct.
be.
But nobody wants that though. So that's the thing though.
Yeah.
Nobody wants you to know about the dirt they did.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
That, buddy, it always comes down to that. So it's multi-layered, right?
Yes.
We want to show we are great. We want to show this our country, right? And then secondly, we don't want nobody to know about the dirt. See, here's the thing. When the George Floyd reckoning came out, what happened? You had all these things start, people had to pay attention to them. Now, that was been around for stuff, but all the history and, you know, white privilege and all these things, right? Which did what? Make people uncomfortable.
Correct.
Versus educating them, where they were like, yeah, that's a good point, and then becoming better and taking it to the next level. So when people feel uncomfortable, and this is the thing, they're not uncomfortable about some shit being made up.
Right.
This is 2 + 2 = 4. All right. So this is the truth, right? That they wasn't even aware of, to be fair. All right. To be fair. And then so now it comes out, and then now you have this social awakening, right? And then now some of the people that you thought was on your side, or I don't want to say they was on your side, but you thought because they didn't know it wouldn't be an issue. Now they're waking up and saying, well, wait a minute, this is wrong. This is this. I couldn't believe the country did blah, 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 blah. And you can't have that. All right. Because then at the end of the day, we and again, buddy, we're not painting broad brushes here, because there's a ton of white people who believe in everything that we're talking about. The majority of them do, to be fair. Okay. But at the end, I don't want to say but. However, you know what? Here's the other thing, is that at the end of the day, people, the power structure, let me put it that way. That's probably a better way. The power structure don't want them to be out. They want them to be ignorant, because if they're ignorant, you can control them. Okay. So when you have the groups, well, the groups are marginalized anyway. So we know they're going to scream and holler and kick back. Right. But if we start getting the majority start, aligning with them over the dirt that we did, we can't have that. All right. So we want to and look, bro, this part of the strategy, this didn't just happen. This was part of a blueprint put together. If I get back in office, this is what we're going to do. Okay. And we're going to eliminate all this stuff. Right. So now we can never be on our heels. Now we don't have to worry about the majority learning these things where they start pushing back and aligning with the marginalized groups. We can't control. We can't be in power. So we want to keep them ignorant. And we just want to highlight the certain things that show our power, and they all look like us.
Right.
Right? Because they all look like us, then nobody can say this is not our country. And buddy, that has a lot to do with it, to be honest.
And it's really a over-rotation or rebalancing of the scales, because in the idea of, and you talked about feudalism a little bit, but the concept of keeping them in the dark and keeping them ignorant is different than the concept of lying and just straight out rewriting or recasting the narrative. That's insane, to recast a narrative that had already been established. But the moral of the story, and kind of to what you were saying, the issue that we're running into is it was so much post George Floyd. So you put that in here. Post George Floyd, there were people that were reaching out to be enlightened and to be educated. We know good white folks that was listening and that was asking questions to you and I specifically about, okay, explain this to me, because I never even thought about it this way. And to their credit, they had no reason to, blah, blah, blah. But what happened in that regard was, wait a second, if you get too many of these people that are woke, if you get too many people that are learned, that are reasonable, that are humanist, then we lose our grip, like you said, on supremacy. So we lose the bad apples argument. Because what happened with Rodney King was those are just some bad apples. And then what
Correct.
happened with Fernando Castillo was those were just a bad. And then eventually you're like, wait a second, the orchard is bad.
Yeah,
'Cause
the
orchard
system is bad, right? The system is bad, right?
Yeah.
But that's exactly what I was saying, right? So then you can't create a narrative because too many people. So we're gonna and look, bro. Let's be fair. This ain't nothing new. When the Civil War, the South came up with the lost cause. Okay, they came up and wrote their own narrative, put their statues up as noblemen. Okay, that all they wanted to do was just have states' rights. They took all the wording and rephrased it and changed it, right? And then when they came out, what was the flick?
Birth of a Nation.
Birth of the Nation. They came on Birth of the Nation. Then they got to move. Now, which and people don't recognize. When Birth of the Nation came out, it wasn't even sound to. It was just black and white, right? But the bottom line is that was a blockbuster. That's like Jaws. That was like Jaws came out, right? Or Back to the Future or whatever. When that came out, and the South was trying to, take care of these evil creatures, black people, right? And then now they're in the Senate and they're eating chicken legs and all that. And we
Couldn't
can't
get
have
pulled.
that,
We couldn't
right?
be
And
swimming
then
with 'em
here
'cause they can
come
get
the
on me.
South riding on their horses to save the day, and that's what the Civil War, buddy. They rewrote it all, so this shit ain't new. Okay, and we talked about it in 1898. I mean, so look, the thing is this: we thought that we were beyond that. Okay, that's the issue. Okay, that's the issue. That was 30 years after slavery. Okay, or 40 years they start. But now, buddy, it doesn't matter. And see, that's the thing. And then we're gonna cut this. But here's the thing.
But Tony, you don't think we are beyond that?
What do you mean?
You don't think America is beyond that type of reputation, beyond that type of salacious way to approach our citizens, that we're not better than to divide and have
No. What I meant was, I thought most people thought that we were beyond doing what they did in the South when they rewrote the history. We're in 2025. That was in 1902. You understand where I'm coming from? So you would think, all right, that we're beyond that. But we're not. You're 100% right? We're not beyond it because at the end of the day, it still matters. Okay?
We are, Tony. I want to believe that those are the bad apples on the other side. I want the MAGAs to be the bad apples now.
Buddy,
I want the majority to be
here. That's like
and,
saying, but here's the thing though, bro. They're in power. Okay? Let's be fair.
Yeah.
Okay. See my point here? Yeah. So if it was a minority, then I get you. I got you. If it was what was my man from Texas who ran for president? If it was a Perot, then I get you. All right. He got 20%, but he ain't win. Yeah. Okay. Those dudes in power now. Okay. You see, that's the difference. Yeah. That's the issue. Okay. And then what was I was gonna say something else, but I forgot. But buddy, so I'm glad he's coming out with this. And look, knowing him, they don't just come out. They look over every detail. If you've never seen none of his stuff, I'm shocked. He's really good. Yeah. If he does it, and it's the truth. But here's one final thing I want to say, and I don't have a clip of that, but it goes back to how we started this. One thing that he did say is that when people see it, and he started to go into it there when he was like, look, we're just throwing it out there. And at the end of the day, we're not trying to make a political agenda or anything like that. We're just telling exactly what it is, right? But the clip after that, what he said is this. I think John Dickerson asked a question, but he said, look, when people watch it, they still come up with their own perspectives. Okay? That will always happen. So in other words, people may watch it. I mean, like, damn, I didn't know that. Or, wow, that's it. And then it could be other people like, well, they did that because of this. You see my point here? Because they want to hold on to whatever they want to hold on. So it doesn't mean, but his point is, that's okay too. The thing is you put it out there and then let everybody see it. I knew where I was going to go to, and this is where I want to end on. Here's the thing. And this is the one thing everything that bugs me the most. It drives me crazy. And I want to answer to it. I think I know the answer. But at the end of the day, and let's go back, we've said this before, after Civil War, Black people was like, let bygones be bygones.
Yep.
And they went out and they started rising. And because they saw them rise, they came up with anything in their power to stop them. And they created a system to stop them. Here's my issue. If people think that Black people are inferior, if they can't lead, they can't build businesses, they can't do innovations, they can't invent stuff, they can't. If you think that, why keep getting in our way? You see my point here? If you think that we're then just, see, here's the thing. People want merit-based, but they don't want merit-based.
That is correct.
Okay, you see my point here, right? If you want true merit-based in everything, then let it be true merit-based. You ain't got to try to, like you say, move the goalposts and all that. Just the best be the best, okay? Just make everything fair, right? The best be the best, and let's see what happens. But they don't want that because they're afraid. See, and that's the issue. It's fear. They're afraid that we will supplant them, or a lot of our people will. Because if we're inferior, or we're second class, or we're this and that, why get in our way? We ain't gonna do nothing anyway. Okay? So why you keep coming up with laws and keep coming up with these things and gerrymandering districts and changing all these different things? So it makes it harder, and it becomes an opposition for us to move forward. If we're nothing, just make it an even playing field, and then let the best man or woman win, right? So my point is, think about that for a second, because you would never try to get in somebody's way if you thought they would never, ever surpass you. Mm-hmm. You would never do that. I don't need to do nothing for him or her. Kidding me? They ain't got right? But you keep putting up goalposts. You keep coming up with systems to stop people, okay? And at the end of the day, there must be a fear factor, because if you didn't fear us, why are you coming up with all these things to impede us from moving forward?
And just to put a cap on it, it's the fear of not feeling special. And as I started at the very beginning, when Ken Burns said what he said, supremacy does not mix well with socialism. And socialism, forget about the political concept of socialism. Socialism is really everybody gets the same opportunity, the same chance to integrate themselves into a civilization or to society. So if a meritocracy is really, if you run the fastest, you have the best test scores, wherever you're the best, that position, that role, that opportunity exists for you. But the problem is, culturally, if this Asian person is better, or if this Black person is better, then all of a sudden it's too many of not like me that's making me feel bad about the culture of this place. And therefore, because I feel bad, forget about the results, forget about the brass tacks and the bottom line, the P&L and the balance sheet and the income statement. I need to feel like I'm superior. And in order to do that, I have to have people who reinforce my superiority. And if I have too much diversity, too much juxtaposition of thought and education and geographic presence, if you look at most firms, I live in Dallas, okay? Texas, there are certain schools that resonate at certain firms at a greater clip. We're not trying to get people from the East Coast, the West Coast, the North. No, it's a good, and I'll end with this. You've heard the term, good old boys.
Yep, that's
network.
True. Yep.
So that's where we are with it. Good, better, and different, and we have to just kind of overcome it. But education, listening, learning, leaning in, these things are great tools to help us chop wood, one swing at a time, chop this thing down, because they're trying to build it up as fast as we're trying to chop it down. And it's just going to build a bad world, a bad civilization for us and our children that we leave behind.
Buddy, you had the last word. We got to leave it there, but thank you for your perspective. I love it. I love it. I love it. So one of the things moving forward, Chris and I, obviously, as the host and co-host of a Black Executive Perspective podcast, we do, weekly shows and stuff of that nature. But one of the things that we're going to make a commitment to is that on a weekly basis, we're going to come here live and just have these frank conversations, just throw down. And so we would love for you to participate. So if you're interested in joining one of our live events, and look, we're not looking for this not to be a Kool-Aid session. We want people who see, have a different perspective, right? As long as you're willing to come on and share and be respectful, I'm all for listening to other people's perspectives because that's how we learn. I do not claim I know everything. I know Chris doesn't as well. So we want to have dialogue. It's important that we have honest dialogue and that we learn from one another. So that's an invitation from us to come on to a Black Executive Perspective podcast, but we're going to be doing this more often on a weekly basis.
Absolutely. Set your notifications. Make sure that you subscribe. And the motto of my university is, and gladly we learn and gladly teach. So we want for you to come in, give your insights, and we'll be able to dissect that real time and give you our perspective as we learn your perspectives. Because as Tony said, we're not the arbiters of everything. Go out and look for yourself. More than one source, more than 5 sources, if you can help it, if you have the stomach for it, because that's the way you're going to get to where you're trying to go in your human journey.
Absolutely. And look, we have other shows on the Black Executive Perspective podcast. So don't forget to check out our show every Thursday, Need to Know with Dr. Nsinga Burton. She dives into the timely and crucial topics that shape our community and world. You don't want to miss what she's bringing to the table each week, every Thursday on the Black Executive Perspective podcast. Check out Need to Know by Dr. Nsinga Burton.
And then also we have the renowned Pull Up Speak Up. Pull Up Speak Up is something that's so innovative and creative where we have panelists who sit and just bare their souls and talk back and forth with each other, just like we were talking about what we'd like to do with you, have that open, candid conversation amongst adults and give different perspective, different vantage points. But we hit today's hardest hitting topics. Every voice counts. Every perspective sparks change. It isn't just talk. It's a call to action. Tune in and join the revolution that is Pull Up Speak Up.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to miss Pull Up Speak Up here on the Black Executive Perspective podcast. So listen, if this is your first time listening or watching a Black Executive Perspective podcast, we have a call to action. Our goal is to eliminate all forms of discrimination. And the way we do this is an acronym that we've come up with called LESS. LESS. Chris, kick it off, buddy.
The L is for learn. As we've been talking about today, educate yourself on racial, cultural nuances, historical nuances. Make sure that you stay informed so that you feel good about the world in which you live in today.
Absolutely. Then after you learn, you have the letter E, which stands for empathy. Since you've learned about groups and other racial and cultural nuances that you wasn't privy to, now you can be more empathetic to those people because now you understand where they're coming from and you can put yourself in their shoes.
The first S is for share. Share your insight and enlighten others. Don't hide it, divide it. When you come onto this platform and we say things, tap your buddy, tap your partner and say, hey, these guys are talking about something. We need to tune in and see what they're on and share this so that way you can grow in your community to understand things better.
Absolutely. And then the final S is stop. We want to stop discrimination as it walks in our path. So if you hear Aunt Jenny or Uncle Joe say something inappropriate at the Sunday dinner table, don't sit back and laugh and say that's cute or, you say, Aunt Jenny, Uncle Joe, we don't believe that. We don't say it. And you stop it right there. So if everyone can incorporate less, LESS, we'll build a more fair, more understanding world. And more importantly, we will all be able to see the change that we want to see because less will become more.
We're excited to talk to you live. On the live, we try to talk about poignant topics that are pivotal for today's conversation this week, this day, this month. We also have platforms where we talk about things from a historical perspective or certain themes that we feel are important. But we want you to make sure that you allow for us to reach you where you'd like to be reached. Come on to the live and tell us things you'd like to talk about. Give us some inspiration and some ideas, but go to the website, sign up for the newsletter. I implore you, please review, subscribe, rate us, and listen to us, and you'll get to grow with us as we grow, because we're growing at an exponential rate. Tony, where can they find us?
My friend, they can find a Black Executive Perspective podcast right here on this channel of YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. And you can follow us on our social channels of LinkedIn, X, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram at A Black Exec. For my fabulous guest, my man down in Dallas, my co-host with the most, my boy, Chris P. Reed, I'm Tony Tidbit. We talked about it. We learned about it. We're going to keep striving about it, and we're going to keep thriving about it. We love you, and now we're out.